You know what they say about sweet little old ladies, right? They're harmless. They bake cookies, knit scarves, and wouldn't hurt a fly. Well, let me tell you about my grandmother. She was all of those things. She'd leave homemade apple pie on the neighbor's doorstep when they were going through a divorce. She'd slip $20 bills into the collection plate even when her Social Security barely covered groceries. She'd pray for people who cut her off in traffic. But when her church, the same church where she'd been faithful for 40 years, decided to stab her in the back, she didn't just get mad. She got methodical. She got strategic. And she got even. And honestly, what she did was so beautifully savage that I'm still in awe years later. If you've ever wanted to see a sweet, humble person serve up ice-cold revenge with a warm smile and a side of biblical justice, buckle up. Because my grandma, she made an entire church wish they'd never, ever underestimated her. This is the story of how the kindest woman I've ever known brought down hypocrites using nothing but their own greed, some old school receipts, and the patience of a saint. Let me paint you a picture of my grandmother, Janet. But everyone called her Mama J. I spent every weekend at her house growing up. The moment you walked through her front door, you were hit with the smell of cinnamon rolls, fresh coffee, and something indefinable that just felt like home. Her house was small but immaculate. Doilies on every surface. A cross-stitch of the Lord's Prayer in the hallway. And always, always, her worn leather Bible open on the kitchen table, pages yellowed from decades of use. She'd been attending Riverside Baptist Church since before I was born. 43 years, to be exact. She never missed a Sunday. I'm talking never. Blizzard? She'd walk 3 miles in knee-deep snow. Flu? She'd show up in a face mask before face masks were cool. The woman was dedicated. But it wasn't just showing up. Grandma was the church lady. She sang soprano in the choir for 20 years. She organized the annual charity drives. She ran the food bank on Thursdays. When the church treasurer had a heart attack, she stepped in and managed their finances for 6 months for free. She knew every member by name. She remembered their birthdays, their anniversaries, their kids' graduations. She'd slip grocery money to struggling families without them knowing. She'd drive elderly members to doctor appointments. And when people needed prayer, they called Mama J. The church was her life. Those people were her family. She donated thousands over the years, money she honestly couldn't afford. When Grandpa died, she even left their old car to the church because pastor might need reliable transportation. She believed in that place. She believed in those people. And that's what made what happened next so absolutely devastating. When Grandpa passed away 5 years ago, Grandma threw herself even deeper into church activities. I think she was trying to fill the void. You know? Suddenly she was volunteering for everything. She'd arrive early to set up chairs, stay late to clean up. She joined the missions committee, the building fund committee, the hospitality committee. If there was a committee, Mama J was on it. But here's where things started getting weird. A new pastor came in, Pastor Derek. Young guy, maybe 35, fresh out of seminary, full of vision and modern approaches. He wanted to revitalize the church, bring in younger families, update everything. Now, Grandma was supportive at first. Change can be good, right? But Pastor Derek started making questionable decisions. First, he wanted to replace the old wooden pews with modern plastic chairs. Grandma asked, "What's wrong with the pews? They're beautiful and they're paid for." Pastor Derek didn't like questions. Then he wanted to hire a professional worship team instead of using the volunteer choir. Grandma asked, "What about the people who've been singing here for decades?" Pastor Derek really didn't like questions. But the final straw came when Grandma's health started declining. Nothing dramatic. She was just getting older. Her arthritis was getting worse. Her medical bills were piling up. She had to cut back on her donations. Instead of giving her usual $200 a month, she could only manage $50. And sometimes nothing at all. That's when she swallowed her pride and asked for help. Not money. She didn't want charity. She just asked if maybe someone could give her rides to doctor appointments. Or if the church could help with groceries, occasionally. You know, the kind of help she'd been giving others for decades. Pastor Derek's response? "We'll pray about it." Translation, no. But it got worse. Much worse. 2 weeks later, she got a letter. A letter. Not even a phone call. A typed, official letter saying her position on the charity committee was being reevaluated and that they needed fresh perspectives. They were pushing her out. After 43 years. I found out later that Pastor Derek had been telling board members that Grandma was resistant to change and too controlling. He said she was holding the church back and that her reduced donations showed she wasn't fully committed. A burden. He called her a burden. This woman who'd given her whole life to that place, who'd sacrificed for them, who'd loved them unconditionally. I'll never forget the day she called me, crying. She said, "I don't understand what I did wrong. I thought they were my family." That broke my heart. But what I didn't know was that Grandma wasn't just heartbroken. She was taking notes. Here's something Pastor Derek didn't know about my grandmother. She'd been keeping the church's financial records for decades. The official books? Yes, but also her own personal copies. Why? Because she was old school. She didn't trust computers. She kept handwritten ledgers, carbon copies of every check, receipts for every purchase. She filed everything in manila folders, organized by year and category. When the church started pushing her out, she decided to take a closer look at those records. And what she found made her furious. Remember those fresh perspectives Pastor Derek wanted? Turns out they were expensive. Very expensive. That $5,000 marked as community outreach, it had actually gone toward a brand new sound system for the sanctuary. Not illegal, but definitely misleading. The $3,000 for youth ministry supplies. That was Pastor Derek's leadership retreat in Myrtle Beach. For him and his wife. No youth involved. The $8,000 building maintenance fund. New furniture for the pastor's office, including a $1,200 leather chair. But here's where it got really interesting. Grandma discovered they'd been double billing for utilities. The church was paying the electric company directly, but they were also listing utility assistance as a separate expense. Where was that extra money going? Into a discretionary fund that only Pastor Derek could access. She found receipts for expensive dinners, spa treatments, even a weekend trip to Asheville that was marked as spiritual counseling. All while telling struggling members like her that there was no money in the budget for assistance. The man was living it up while his congregation scraped by. And Grandma? She had proof. But she didn't go nuclear immediately. No, she was smarter than that. She made copies of everything. Then she spent 2 weeks verifying every detail, cross-referencing bank statements, even calling vendors to confirm purchases. She built an ironclad case, and then she waited for the perfect moment to strike. The annual church meeting was coming up, the one where they'd announce the budget for the next year and ask for increased donations. Pastor Derek had been talking about it for weeks, asking members to step up their giving and invest in the church's future. 3 days before the meeting, Grandma made her move. She mailed a packet to every single member of the church board, not email, actual mail, because she wanted them to physically hold the evidence. Inside each packet was a complete breakdown of the church's finances, with highlighted discrepancies and handwritten notes in her neat cursive. She'd even included photocopies of receipts and bank statements. The cover letter was pure poetry. Dear board members, as someone who has loved this church for over 4 decades, I felt it was my Christian duty to share some concerns about our financial stewardship. I believe Jesus himself would want us to be good stewards of the money our congregation has sacrificed to give. I've enclosed documentation showing how our donations have been used. I trust you'll review this carefully and prayerfully consider whether these expenditures align with our church's mission and values. In Christian love, * Janet Adams. The letter was so polite, so respectful, that it made the evidence even more damning. But she wasn't done. 2 days before the meeting, she wrote one final donation check for exactly $10. In the memo line, she wrote, "For the funeral of your integrity." She placed it in the offering plate that Sunday morning, just as Pastor Derek was launching into his sermon about sacrificial giving. The church secretary opened it during the service. I watched her face go white as she read the memo. But the real bombshell came during the business meeting. Pastor Derek stood up, all smiles, and announced their fundraising goal. $50,000 for church improvements. That's when Grandma stood up. "Before we talk about giving more," she said in her sweet grandmother voice, "I think we should talk about where our previous donations went." The room went silent. "I have some questions about the budget," she continued, pulling out a folder. "For instance, I'm curious about the $8,000 spent on building maintenance that actually went to office furniture, and the $3,000 for youth ministry that paid for a couple's retreat." Pastor Derek's face went red. "Mrs. Adams, this isn't the appropriate forum for—" "Oh, but it is," Grandma interrupted, "because I sent documentation to every board member 3 days ago. Did you review it, Pastor? Because I have copies for everyone else." She started passing out packets to the congregation. People were flipping through them, their expressions changing from confusion to shock to anger. I also have a question about the utility bills, she continued. We seem to be paying them twice each month. Where does that extra money go? Pastor Derek was stammering now. These are accounting errors. Simple mistakes. For 3 years, Grandma asked. The same mistakes, every month for 3 years? The room was buzzing now. People were asking questions, demanding answers. Board members were looking at each other nervously. And then Grandma delivered the knockout punch. I want everyone to know, she said, that I've been wrestling with whether to remain a member of this church. After 43 years, I've been told I'm no longer needed, that I'm a burden. She let that sink in for a moment. So I've made a decision. The $50,000 I had designated in my will for this church will instead go to the Community Baptist Church across town. They're feeding homeless people and helping single mothers. They seem to understand what Christian charity actually means. She smiled sweetly. I'll be visiting there next Sunday. Anyone who wants to see how donations are actually used for God's work is welcome to join me. And then she walked out. Half the congregation followed her. The fallout was immediate. By Monday morning, the church board had called an emergency meeting. By Wednesday, they'd hired an independent auditor. By Friday, Pastor Derek had been asked to resign, pending a full investigation. Turns out, Grandma's documentation was just the tip of the iceberg. The professional audit uncovered even more irregularities. The state got involved. There were legal implications. Pastor Derek left town quietly. No forwarding address. The church lost about 60% of its membership over the next 6 months. The ones who stayed voted to implement strict financial oversight and transparency measures. Meanwhile, Grandma settled into her new church family beautifully. They made her head of the hospitality committee on her second visit. She started teaching Sunday school again. She even joined their choir. When she passed away 2 years later, both churches held memorial services for her. But the one at Community Baptist was standing room only. In her eulogy, Pastor Williams said something I'll never forget. Janet showed us that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable. She didn't seek revenge, she sought justice. And sometimes in God's economy, they're the same thing. But honestly, I think it was both. It was justice for the struggling families who'd been denied help while Pastor Derek lived lavishly. It was justice for the faithful members who'd sacrificed their own needs to give to the church. And yeah, it was revenge. Beautiful, strategic, devastating revenge served with a smile and a side of righteous indignation. Before she died, Grandma told me something I'll never forget. I didn't do it because I was angry. I did it because sometimes good people need to see that their goodness has power, that they don't have to accept being treated badly just because they're kind. She taught me that there's a difference between being meek and being weak, and that sometimes the most Christ-like thing you can do is flip over some tables. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where your kindness was taken advantage of? Where people mistook your gentle nature for weakness? What did you do? Or what do you wish you'd done? Drop your stories in the comments. I read every single one. And if you love seeing hypocrites get exposed by the very people they underestimated, smash that subscribe button because I've got more stories of quiet people serving up loud justice. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Because apparently, the meek don't just inherit the earth. Sometimes they burn down the corrupt institutions first.